Early bird. We are almost at 6 o'clock. We do have about 150 people that registered for tonight's event. So we're just going to give our wonderful Griselda Villarreal an opportunity to let everyone in the room, and we will get started in about 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you. Alrighty, it is 6:01, and so I think we will get started on tonight's meeting, the drought response for Healdsburg update. Really appreciate everyone signing on for this incredibly important discussion, and probably the first of many of these events updating the community on where we're at with water supply. So Griselda, if it's possible to go to the next slide. All right, quick rundown for the evening. Introductions. First of all, my name is Felicia Smith. I am the Utility Conservation Analyst for the city of Healdsburg. I have been here for, I'm just celebrating my 3rd-year anniversary with the city. And we have Director Terry Crowley with us, who will be co-presenting with me. Terry, how long have you been with the city?
10 years.
10 years, a decade, right on. So quick rundown on the agenda. Terry will start us off with a water supply update, really kind of helping us understand the severity of the water supply issue. I'm going to talk a little bit about water demands, and then we're going to jump into stage 3 rules and restrictions. Guessing most of us know what they are, but let's talk about all of the nitty-gritty details, the rationale, and all of the frequently asked questions around those. We'll also review how to comply, enforcement, and then hopefully leave enough time at the end for questions. I've been getting a lot of phone calls this last week, and I think I have a good sense of certainly the most frequently asked questions. And so our hope is through the course of the presentation to answer those common questions. And then at the end, we can kind of get into the more specifics. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. And the one after that, and Terry will take it away on water supply and drought conditions.
So good evening, and thanks for taking time out of your day or your evening to listen to us talk about the water supply. You know, the actions that we've taken over the past couple of weeks are significant. We are asking a lot of the community, but we're not doing this lightly. The water supply situation is very, very dire. It's something that we haven't seen in many years. Some say that this is similar to the 1970s droughts, or potentially worse than the 1970s droughts. So with that, I want to show you some slides. So next slide, please. So background information. So Lake Mendocino is currently at 37.9% of the targeted water supply. And that's largely due to rainfalls last winter being only 38% of normal. 2 weeks ago, when we presented to council, the water supply of Lake Sonoma was 40%. So we've lost 2% of that water supply in the past 2 weeks. That continues to fall, and there is a limit to the water that's in Lake Mendocino. In March, the state board issued warnings of water supply shortages. Basically, this is due to the low rains that they were monitoring and the shortage of supply. In April 21st, the governor declared a drought emergency specific to the Russian River watershed. And you saw a lot of those pictures with the governor standing out in the lake bed where it's dry and normally would be 40 feet of water. May 2nd, the city council implemented stage 2 mandatory water conservations, really trying to build some movement towards water conservation and really prepare the community for what was ahead in the summer. May 25th, State Board issued notices of unavailability to the city's water rights on the Russian River. So what this means is that the State Board made a statement to the city that there's not a sufficient amount of supply for the city to continue to divert from the Russian River. That basically starts a point where the city has to implement additional restrictions on water usage and really rely on other water sources. Over the month of May 2021, the city actually used 3% more water than was used in the month of May 2020. So we didn't, in the month of May, really make a lot of headway on conservation. But more recently, the 7-day average is showing 19% reduction over the same 7-day period in 2020. And then if we look at 2019, 2018, we also see similar numbers of a 20% reduction at this point. So we're basically halfway to our goal of 40%. And again, June 7th, City Council implemented stage 3 mandatory conservation. And really the goal of the mandatory conservation is to take the existing water supply that we have and try and spread that out through the rest of the summer and into the fall. And hopefully we can make it to the point where the rains start again and we can alleviate some of these mandatory conservation measures. But again, that is right now what we're forecasting is would take 40% reduction in water usage. So next slide, please. So this is a really busy slide, but I want to take a moment to show what is on this and kind of explain what it means. So this purple line, this magenta line, is showing the water supply and water storage within Lake Mendocino. And it goes forward and forecast based on Sonoma Water's limited releases. So they're now at a critical dry year release, which is 25 CFS that they have to maintain at all points in the upper Russian River. And so they'll continue to make those releases such that here at Healdsburg, we see no less than 25 CFS. And then if you've noticed, Healdsburg and Memorial Bridge and the river down there, it's very low, but that's the critically low limits, and that's where it will stay for the rest of the summer as long as there's water supply in Lake Mendocino. What shows here, when you start to see these other graphs that jump up, these are different rain years. So rain years ranging from 1911 all the way to 2017 have been added into this graph to kind of indicate what the storage level of Lake Mendocino might be under various conditions that have been measured. And under some conditions, under the very, very dry conditions, Lake Mendocino will go dry in July 2022. And that's what's really concerning a lot of the water supply analysis and Sonoma Water and everybody else that's relying on in the Russian River, is that we need to make it through this summer, but we also need to plan for a dry winter, and how that may affect our water supply next summer. And so that's where Sonoma Water has really strongly recommended that everybody try to work together and band into an agreement that we try and maintain a 20,000 acre foot storage level in Lake Mendocino by October 1st of this year. And to do that, Sonoma Water has forecasted that it would take about an 85% reduction in usage on the upper Russian River. And so some people are going to have to reduce more, some people are going to have to reduce less to make that 85%. Largely the agricultural customers, livestock, vineyards, crops. Those are at this point really looking at getting a zero allocation. So they're in a position where they're not going to be able to run their businesses, run their farms this summer. And what that does is it allows cities like Healdsburg to have a little bit of water supply for their public health and public safety needs. But again, we're really hoping that we'll have an average rainfall year, but if we do have a dry, it's pretty critical. So if we don't do any type of conservation, or we don't achieve any type of meaningful conservation, we'll be challenged with losing water in this year in Lake Sonoma. So the next slide will show that. So this slide shows basically the same forecasting, but with no conservation. So not reaching that 85% conservation that's recommended by Sonoma Water. And this shows the Lake Sonoma going dry in roughly November and staying dry in a dry year through next summer. And that puts us in a very critical condition, is that the mandates that we have today would carry forward into next summer. And so that's why trying to achieve early conservation is so important, because it helps us preserve some water storage in Lake Mendocino. And again, like I said, this is a very unique situation. This is not something that's been seen since these water storage reservoirs have been created. This is the lowest storage year so far. I think just recently, this rain year became the lowest rain year on record for Ukiah. So we're just challenged with some pretty unprecedented times. So next slide, please. So this is, again, trying to tell the same story, but in a different viewpoint. So this is from Sonoma Water's webpage. They update the storage levels of Lake Mendocino and Lake Sonoma. And what's showing here is this purple line here. This is the 2014 drought. And we all generally remember that 2014 drought and the conservation measures that we had to do and the cutbacks we had to do. But that was under this level of water supply that is about 10 to 15,000 acre feet higher than where we're at currently. Currently, this black line is showing the storage level of Lake Mendocino, and it's much, much lower. And it's trending downwards because obviously there's no rain and there's no runoff from tributaries that would potentially fill Lake Mendocino. So the water that we have today is the water that we'll have through the rest of the summer and into the fall until we start getting some appreciable rains. And that's really why we need to really buckle down and conserve and save some of this water so that we have drinking water, we have the ability to take showers, we have the ability to flush our toilets, we have the ability to cook and clean late into the fall. So next slide, please. So specific to Healdsburg, in a normal rain year, Healdsburg has adequate water supplies. But in drought years, there is a need for conservation. And this is the drought year, so there's a need for conservation. And this is kind of the cycle that Healdsburg is in. And we should expect to be in this cycle going forward. Again, May 25th, the notice from the Water Board limits the city water rights supply to only that of public health and public safety needs. So we're really supposed to be pulling down to only that indoor water usage that's needed to maintain sanitation, to bathe, to shower, to clean your food, to flush your toilets, and then public safety needs to be able to fight fires or other public safety services. So at this time, the city's Dry Creek water right is unaffected, and the city has a contract with Sonoma Water, but that's been reduced by 20%. And so the city has a little bit more water than what the state board would limit us to as far as public health and public safety needs. Public health and public safety needs are roughly 55 gallons per person per day. Right now, we're asking residents to stay below 74 gallons per person per day, and then asking the commercial businesses in town to reduce by 40%. And that's really the reason that we can have those higher limits, is because we have this Dry Creek water right, and we have a contract with Sonoma Water for contracted water. And so under these conditions, you know, with the loss of the Russian River, we really need to see our supply limited to about 60% of the city's normal summertime needs. Again, a 40% reduction in usage. If the conservation is not achieved soon, water available through Sonoma Water will run out, leaving the city with only the Dry Creek right and will require further water restrictions. And so the contract with Sonoma Water is for a finite amount of water. Once we use up that water, then we don't have access to that contract anymore. And then we would only have the city's Dry Creek right, plus the ability to divert for public health and public safety needs. And that would push us into this 55 gallons per person per capita. And that 55 gallons per person per capita limit is the city's entire water needs. It's not just the needs for residents, it's the entire water needs, and it has to be shared with the businesses. If we don't stay within our water supply limits, the state will fine us. And if we don't reach those conservation goals and continue to have historic water usage, that's roughly about a $250,000 fine per month for the city. That's not something the city can afford, nor do I think the city wants to have that headline of being the violator in a major drought. So next slide, please. So with this, I'm going to turn it back over to Felicia. She's going to talk a little bit more about water demands, where our water is being used, who's using it, and then move into the rest of the presentation.
Thank you. So as just described, we do have a scarcity of a precious resource. And I think that the very understandable and common question is like, who all is using what? Where is our water going? So if you could go to the next slide, Griselda. I pulled data points for 2 years, 2019 and 2020. We know 2020 was an anomaly year, but I think this tells a pretty compelling story about where our water is going. So in 2019, 68% was used by residential accounts, that's single family homes and multifamilies. And 22% was used by our commercial customers. The city was 3%, schools are 3%, and a little bit for industrial, wineries, and churches are also in there as a small blip. So you can go to the next slide. So 2020, a little bit different, but pretty comparable. 72% was residential, 19% was commercial. And so what we see year over year is about 70% of our water use goes to residents, about 20% goes to commercial. That's a total of 90% of our water use citywide. Next slide. I want to show you what happens between winter usage and summer usage. And so what you're looking at is the blue bars represent January 2019, just like a wet winter month, compared to a very hot September 2019 summer month. It's very dry. And so you see the green bars jumps significantly. For commercial customers, we see about a 50% increase in water use between the winter and summer months, and residential is 60%. And what you're looking at in that delta is just simply water that we don't have available to us right now. And that's where the water restrictions start to come into play. Where can we restrict? And we simply don't have enough water for outdoors. Can we go to the next slide? Which takes us to stage 3, rules and restrictions. I'm going to run through these and simultaneously try and answer some of the common questions that I've been getting this last week. Next slide. So first and foremost, for residential customers, we have assigned or created a residential water allowance of 74 gallons per person per day. This number and this allowance is really intended to serve all of your indoor water needs: cooking, cleaning, flushing, showering, clothes washing. We did prohibit irrigation, both sprinklers and drip irrigation, in order to ensure that people can stay within this allowance. I know that drip irrigation is more efficient than hand watering. However, any automatic sprinkler system is far too easy to be over budget. We need people to actively manage their water use and our intent is to prioritize indoor water use. We will be providing a recycled water service, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but I do just want to emphasize hand watering. One is available to those that are very conservative with their indoor water use and has a little bit of cushion in their budget. And is really intended to be used on high priority trees, shrubs, and food producing plants. It is not practical or likely that you will be able to maintain your landscaping within your water allowance. So really shifting the focus from outside to this water has to be preserved so we can continue to do our essential functioning inside. In addition, we have prohibited the planting of any new landscaping. There's just not enough water to keep anything to take root. And lastly, just wanted to highlight, this was part of stage 2, car washing and power washing are prohibited. Moving on to commercial rules, a lot of the same ones, no irrigation, no car washing or power washing. However, commercial accounts have to achieve a 40% reduction in their water usage. It wasn't practical or feasible to assign allowances to commercial customers. And so they look at their total usage and their goal is to just drastically reduce by 40%. So I want to pause here for a second. Our overarching city goal is a 40% reduction. And in order to achieve that, we need our commercial entities to reduce by 40%, and we need our residents to meet their water allowance. That combination of those two things, which is 90% of our water usage, will help us meet and ideally achieve our 40% citywide reduction. So I think there's a lot of residents that are like, I have an allowance, but I need to reduce 40%. If you are a resident of Healdsburg, just focus on your water allowance to help us achieve that citywide goal. All right, next slide. There is one caveat to the citywide prohibition on irrigation, and that is community parks and community spaces. We've identified 6 priority parks that have been authorized to use potable water. These are our public spaces. These are our recreation spaces. They do have a different function. So Rec Park, the Community Center, Plaza, Roundabout Landscaping, Georgie Park, and the Healdsburg Unified High School, their new field, and the elementary school, which we use for baseball games. Potable water is approved, but both community services and the Healdsburg Unified School District are working really, really hard to set up recycled water so that they can contribute to reducing the demand on our drinking water and potable water. I did want to mention when the field was going in to the high school, they did plummet for recycled water. So they are actually set up and prepared for that. It's just figuring out the logistics. So while they are right now using potable water, there is a plan to transition some of these spaces over. Next slide. Okay, how do we comply? 74 gallons per person per day. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of people haven't really thought about how much water they use each and every day. You can go to the next slide. The best place to start is to look at your utility bill. In the bottom left-hand corner, we give a 12-month look back of how much electricity you're using and how much water you're using. And the column all the way to the right shows you your average gallons per day. And so I would recommend that you start with your winter water usage, which we know is your irrigation isn't on, but it's just your indoor usage. And so in this example, you see in October and November, this person, let's assume it's a 2-person household, right? We're going to divide that number by 2. They're using 35 to 45 gallons per person per day. And so that's going to be a really good baseline for you to understand where am I at in the day based solely on my indoor water use. And that will help you determine what little bit you have to potentially be used outside on some of those priority plants. So I'd highly recommend that you look at your utility bill. And while you're there, you might as well look at your electric usage. If you're using more than 600 kilowatt hours per month, you are higher than the Healdsburg average, and there might be some opportunity for energy efficiency. Just saying, because we're already assessing our bills. Next slide. If you find that your winter water usage is above 74 gallons per person per day, you might consider more active management, which means looking at your water meter. So we've been getting some questions about this. I wanted to run through an example of, okay, you open up your water meter box and what on earth are you looking at? And so the first thing that you need to know is your meter is measuring cubic feet, and 1 cubic feet equals 7.48 gallons. We're all gonna get really good with water units by the end of this. So in the example to the right, the digits that have the black background, that's what we're monitoring, and that's what we wanna record. So today it says 10. And if we were to go out tomorrow and it says 13, here's how you figure this out. 13 minus 10 gives you 3 cubic feet. And you multiply that by 7.48 gallons, and you know those 3 units means that you use 22.4 gallons in the day. Similarly, if you went out the next day, so it was at 10 and now it says 26. The delta 16 times 7.48 is 119 gallons in that day. That's a quick high level overview of how to read your water meter. If you find that your winter water usage is well below the 74 gallons per person per day, it's probably not necessary that you actively manage this on a daily or weekly basis. If you do look at your water meter, we ask that you just close that lid nice and tight because it is a potential trip fall hazard. So just leave it as you found it. Next slide. Okay, pro tips. So what are we doing around the house in order to drastically reduce our usage? I think a lot of us are doing a lot of these, but just wanted to make sure you're aware of some of the resources that are available to you. Flush less. 20% of our indoor water use goes towards flushing. And so if there's an opportunity to flush less, there's a huge opportunity for savings. Potentially washing clothes less. Certainly use your discretion in this, but clothes damage very easily in the clothes washer. So if you want to preserve them and save water, simply wash less. I have noticed some people rinsing recyclables. Stop that. That's a waste of water and completely unnecessary. Trying to be mindful of the water that we're using at the kitchen sink. Just like we're in the habit of turning off the faucet when we're brushing our teeth, if we can apply those same practices at the kitchen sink as we're setting things up. If you have a dishwasher, you do not need to pre-rinse. And I'm actually really hoping that someone might take on the challenge of taking a picture of some really dirty dishes that are in your dishwasher, a before and after of how clean that they come out. New dishwashers do a phenomenal job and pre-rinsing isn't needed. I know everyone has told me they've got the bucket in place in the shower, collecting cold water as they're waiting for hot water, and encouraging people to do the same thing in the sink. It's really amazing how much goes down the drain as you're doing dishes. And then baths, whether it's kids, leisure, dogs, trying your best to collect that to be used outside. Next slide. Slightly more advanced, but worth considering. A couple months ago, we did a video on installing a recirculation pump that can save about 1.5 to 2.2 gallons per minute. Installing a gray water system, which takes the old discharged water from your clothes washer and applies that to your landscape. We do offer a rebate on that. And then upgrading, one of the big water hogs in households is top loader clothes washers. And so starting to research and potentially replacing with a front loader. We also have a rebate on that. We will be developing enhanced and improved rebates for water saving devices and appliances, and they will be made retroactive. So I would encourage, if you're looking at some of these measures, go ahead and do them. And then there's an opportunity to get improved rebates in the next month or two on those. Next slide. Okay, from there, we're gonna talk a little bit about how does this get enforced? Barry?
Okay, so next slide, please. So just to preface this, our goal and our approach is to work with the community to find ways to save water. We want to find collective best practices. We want to share those best practices. We want to share the success stories. We want to work together with everybody to find the best way for everyone to save water such that we can reach this 40% goal. But what we do have hanging over our head from the state board is that they will fine us if we don't get below our allotments for water. And those fines are pretty significant. So $1,000 per day for the city and $2,500 per acre foot. And again, you know, we talked earlier in this, that's about a $2,500 per month fine if we stay at our historical level. So we do need to have some conservation there. If we can't get compliance just through messaging, through sharing of best practices, through helping people understand the need for conservation, we do have the ability to go out and enforce. And so we are actively right now patrolling the city in the mornings, looking for lawns that are either using overhead sprinklers, lawns that are wet, you know, any type of runoff or any type of water waste. And what we're doing is we're noting that water waste. We bring it back to the office in the morning, we write a letter, we mail out that letter. It's just a courtesy letter at this point, really trying to get people to understand that there are some conservation measures out there that need to be implemented, that irrigation does need to be turned off. And as we go through that process, we do another patrol the next week or the next day, and we see that there's no change, then we can ramp up and start talking about notices of violation, go through that process with the notice of violation, then potentially administer some citations that would have fines. Those fines can be up to $1,000 per day to try and incentivize a change in behavior. Obviously, that's not something we want to do. We want to get to compliance as soon as possible, and that will really happen with the outreach and coordination and education we're trying to do right now. But hopefully we get compliance with the first letter. Gross violations, if we can't get the fines to implement conservation, the city has the option to either reduce or restrict the water use of that property. That could include disconnecting water service. We just really don't have enough water that we can see significant waste. And so we do have these tools, but again, our overall goal is to gain compliance through the sharing of best practices, through the sharing of success stories, and really trying to get the community to work together as a collectively to achieve this 40% reduction. Next slide, please. So recycled water deliveries, Felicia has been taking a lot of questions on this. This is a new program that we're trying to develop as fast as possible, and Felicia will run through some of the details on it.
Yeah, so starting this week or last week, I started getting calls. I think recycled water once had like an ick factor, and now it is like liquid gold. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what this program is going to entail. Next slide. Okay, high level overview. This is what we have so far. We are committing to delivering up to no more than 500 gallons per residential customer one time per week. In order to get set up for this, residents will need to procure their own storage container. We've seen olive barrels. We've seen anything between 55-gallon drums and 500-gallon tanks. In terms of placement, we do need to be able to access it fairly easily. And so within 75 feet of the property frontage or curbside, no gates, no fences. We have a lot of customers that we want to serve, and so we have to be able to get to it fairly easily. Customers cannot connect to their irrigation system, and so you will also need to procure a pump and a hose to be able to apply the water, hand water. And residents will receive a recycled water lawn sign in order to help denote who's using recycled water. One, to better promote the program and make sure that your neighbors know why your parcel and your landscaping maybe looks a little bit different. The other thing that I'll add about the recycled water and the tanks that people are getting, there's a big opportunity to use these for a secondary purpose. I know everyone's buying them right now for this immediate need. The secondary use is rainwater capture. And so while you might be placing it somewhere conveniently located for a truck now, thinking about how you're going to connect that to a downspout so that you can collect any rain that we get this winter and any winter thereafter. So it definitely has a kind of a long-term sustainability use. And I will share contact information and how to get signed up on that program. Next slide. Okay, frequently asked questions. Some of these we hit, but let's run through them. Next slide. Okay, the number one question I'm getting is around drip irrigation. Isn't it more efficient than landscaping? And the answer is yes, it is. Hand watering is only available to those with a little bit of budget left for their water. It's really designed to save priority plants. Again, it is not intended that you are hand watering everything on your property. Certainly that would make no sense. We have so little room for error in how we use our water. And so we really do have to prioritize indoor use. I'm sure you've heard me say that a few times. Okay, how do you know how many people are in the household? So our focus for enforcement around the water budget is we're really gonna start looking at the highest users to start. And so if we find usage that suggests more than 5 people in the house, we're gonna start there and ask for proof of occupancy or help them whittle down if there aren't actually 5 people in the house. So we do encourage that anyone that has 5 more people in the house, if you wouldn't mind calling utility billing at 431-3307 and letting them know how many people are in the household. But our main strategy right now is highest users first, but in the meantime, there is a degree of the honor system. Another question I'm getting is, what if we have guests? Do they get a budget? And the unfortunate answer is if you have temporary guests that are staying for a weekend or a couple of days, they have to work within your water allowance, which might cut into what you're able to use outside. Full-time guests staying with you for a month, 3 months, certainly students that are coming home from college, maybe somebody's doing a renovation project and moving in with you for 6 weeks, they are given an allowance. And so we do encourage, if you have guests, that they take military showers and they know the rules for Healdsburg. Okay, those are the 3 main questions that I've been getting. And so with that, I'm gonna take, we've got plenty of time. I'm gonna take a couple of questions that came up in the chat. And from there, we will open it up and let people ask questions live. But let's see how many of these we can get through. Okie dokes. Terry, I'm gonna ask you this first question and we can tag team it. Are there any incentives for households that conserve water and consume less than the mandated 75 gallons per person per day?
So one of the programs that we're looking at, again, this is all happening very quickly. One of the programs that we're looking at is to provide a reward program, an incentive program to recognize the biggest savers in water. And we're looking at potentially looking at residential customers to see, okay, how much can a residential customer save? Who's got the best practices implemented, and then find some type of reward program. That's still under development and trying to put something out there. But it's something that will come probably in the next month.
The next question is, the State Water Board had notified drought conditions and concerns last year. Why did it take so long for the city to get the word out to residents? Why weren't we brought up to speed to help solve the problem collectively before it became an emergency? I'll take the first stab at that, which is starting, I would say in about November, we did start to sound the alarm through our engagement channels, be it our Friday updates. We knew it was going to be a La Nina year, and we wanted to start to prepare people for that. However, I will say that, and I maybe was guilty of falling into this boat of, in advance of a rainy season, you're just really, really hopeful that you get enough rain. And so I think that talking to people about water conservation during the winter just doesn't resonate as much. But we did certainly try and steadily cascade that message starting in November of 2020 when we knew it was going to be a problem. How close to the curb does the storage tank need to be? 75 feet or less, as easy access as possible, please. The rationale for hand watering, again, it's an imperfect solution. It's really trying to get people to pivot to prioritizing indoor water use. We mentioned how many people are in the household, really targeting the highest users first. Oh, I did want to answer this question. Are you familiar with the Flume water monitoring system? Why not train residents how to look at their own meters and use the Flume? So we are very, very excited about Flume. It's a great, it easily attaches to your water meter. It is Wi-Fi connected. It has a really nice app interface. It's super easy to use and informative. We have one meter that it may not be compatible with. And so before we start overly promoting Flume, we want to make sure that it works for all of the meters. And if not, providing clear instructions of how to determine if it works or not. So we're getting there with Flume, and I am excited about that. You've only focused on residential users. What about commercial users? They do have a mandate of a 40% reduction, and actually Terry and myself will be meeting with the Chamber of Commerce tomorrow morning to kind of talk about implementation of that and how we can support and what businesses need to do. So we're certainly engaged with the business community. Can we revisit the decision? If it's okay, Griselda, I maybe want to elevate Mark Thamig for this. Can we revisit the decision to use potable water for the parks and schools to mitigate water usage and charges to the city? Only use reclaimed, not potable water. And as Mark gets on here, I will note our total city water usage for our city facilities, including parks, is 3%. And when we compare that to residents and businesses, which are 90%, it's a small dent. That's not to say that we don't need all hands on deck in reducing water usage, but just wanted to put some numbers to that.
I'm sorry, Felicia, can you repeat the question? I was coming on, so I missed part of it.
The question is, can we revisit the decision to use potable water for the 6 parks and schools to mitigate water use and charges to the city?
Yeah, very, very good question. We did an analysis, and even on what we did first is we looked at what are the highest used facilities and what are the most important facilities to keep alive, because to be honest, the other ones, the turf's probably going to die. It's going to go dormant, and then if there's a lot of use on it, potentially will die. So we started there and worked very closely with the school district and with the golf course operations to talk about our water use in general. We focused down onto our priority list. And through that process, we were able to eliminate about 70, I'm gonna pull up the spreadsheet, give me 1 second here. It's about 72% of our water usage overall between the school district, the city, and the golf course, 74%. So we went from an average of about 10 million gallons a month to about 2.6 million gallons a month of city water usage. As part of the 2.6 million, we looked at how much time would that take to haul that much water. And it is about 320 hours, labor hours a week to haul that much water to irrigate all of our facilities with recycled water. So that's not feasible from a cost standpoint or in terms of, I mean, it's more than 24-hour-a-day operation. It's multiple vehicles running on city streets 24 hours a day, running pumps and things like that. What we are still working on is select sites within that priority list of moving those to recycled water. The bigger sites like the high school field and Recreation Park would still need to stay on the city system because it's just not feasible to haul enough water to irrigate those. As we move further into this, we may need to reduce some additional facilities, which will unfortunately impact our users, mainly our youth, who have already been impacted for the past year. So it's complicated, but we're continuing to work on targeting recycled water within those priority sites where we can.
Thanks, Mark. I have one other question as it relates to parks that came up. What about Badger Park Community Garden? Are we allowed to water?
I believe that gardening with hand watering is still permitted under the stage 3 water emergency, correct?
Yeah, and I'm also wondering if maybe there's an opportunity to set them up with recycled water, potentially to be used.
It could be a site that we look at for recycled water.
Cool. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Someone said the bill you posted as an example, the winter month usage was more than the summer, which I don't think was the case. I did choose one that has lower usage in the winter because that would be common. Can I, Terry, do you want to take this one? Can I access my water usage online?
So at this point, we can't. We really would hope to have a tool in place where customers can go online and receive accurate information from their water meters and sometime in some point in real time. We are actively internally working on a project that will update our billing system, update or install a meter data management system that would help collect that data from our water meters and electric meters, and then present that to a customer portal, but we will not have that available for this summer. We would hope that we'd have available for next summer, but that will be a stretch to get there. So unfortunately right now, the best tools that you have available to you are really to go out and look at your meter and monitor that usage that you can read off the face of the meter.
Thank you. I'm going to answer maybe 4 more questions from the chat that have come up pretty regularly, and then from there we'll transition into live questions so it can be a little bit more conversational. Can you address homes with swimming pools and what tips you have for them? Swimming pools are going to be really, really challenging. Number 1, make sure that you have a cover, but that still doesn't negate the fact that you need to top off. You lose water from evaporation. The best suggestion I have for you right now is contracting with potable water haulers, because you're not going to be able to meet your water allowances and top off your pool, but make sure you're using that pool cover each and every day to reduce evaporation. Terry, I'm going to ask, what about medical issues where additional water is required for healthcare purposes?
Again, you know, our overarching goal is to really work with the community and find solutions that work for everybody to reduce water where it's possible. Again, the state is looking at public health, public safety needs. And so if there's a bona fide public health or public safety need that requires you to go beyond or slightly beyond a water budget, that's something we're going to work with you on. I mean, again, we are here to help support and serve the community through this emergency. And we're going to be reasonable. You know, and a good example would be to look at the hospital. I don't think it's reasonable for the city to ask the hospital to reduce by 40% if that would affect the level of service that they're providing to the community. It's certainly reasonable for the city to ask the hospital to turn off their outdoor irrigation. But beyond that, you know, there's a significant public health, public safety benefit to having that hospital in town and operating at its peak performance. So same, likewise, if there is a health need or a safety need, we will certainly work with residents on those issues.
And then one more for you is, how can you monitor the hotels?
So every service in town is metered. And so we can continue to monitor the hotels. What we are doing with our meters, the vast majority, more than 90% of our meters are remote read meters. So we can pull readings on a daily basis from meters within town. We're setting a report where we'll pull metering data on a weekly basis, and we'll trend that week over week to make sure that there is some significant reduction, or we're seeing trendings towards reductions. Where we don't see reductions, or we see increases in usage, or we see gross usage of water, We're going to try and contact those customers mid-bill cycle and see if there's something we can do to adjust or work with them to find ways to conserve water.
Thank you, Carrie. With that, I think we'll open it up. We have about 10 more minutes left, and I want to make sure that we actually hear from people in addition to the typed questions. I know I'm working off of the Q&A and we have more in the chat, but if folks want to raise their hand and talk to us live, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I was just wondering why you couldn't make everything more simple by just stipulating how much each household can consume in a month and leave it at that, you know, rather than trying to micromanage, going out at night, seeing which lawns are wet and which are not, and, you know, all sorts of things. If you could just stipulate this is how much you're allowed to consume and leave it to each household to do that, I think it's a much better system. This sounds very confused, frankly, and it's going to be a nightmare to implement.
Yeah,
and you know, good, give fines if people don't meet those limits. By all means, whatever, you know, whatever. But I think let us trust all of us to be a little adult about this.
Yeah, so we're straddling between what the state is telling us, which is prioritize your water for public safety and public health, while also allowing a tiny bit of water to be used on key and priority plants and trees, shrubs, and vegetable gardens. Outdoor irrigation, you saw it in that chart, jumps 60%. And so if we don't actively manage and drastically reduce how we're using our water, we're not going to reach the 40%. Hi, Robin.
Hi there. Good presentation. Quick question. Will you be posting the presentation so that people who couldn't attend could get a hold of it? Okay. And secondly, I'm concerned about the wildfire hazard that's could be presented by all of the landscaping in this area going to tinder, right? Going dry. So, you know, how do we address that concern?
Yep. If it's okay, I'm going to have Griselda elevate Linda Collister from our fire department while I mention that this is posted and live streamed on Facebook, and it will be posted on our website so people can listen back. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Collister. I'm your fire marshal. Great question. So right now, our main focus is the water conservation. We are in an emergency right now. And so what is really kind of works together is we've always been trying to work on fuels management on the fire side to get ready for any wildfires that come. So some of the suggestions that I would say were, you know, we've been working on hardening of your structure, which is really important, like 0 to 5 feet. We saw during the wildfires, 0 to 5 feet of hardscape around your homes really helped save a lot of houses during the wildfires. And then also we're looking at breaking up the continuity of any of your fuels. Like a lot of people have landscaping that is continuous fuel, which also is not good for wildfires. So if you could break up the continuity of fuel using, you know, hardscape like rocks and sand is really good. And then also on a broader scale, you know, we're getting these grants. We're going to do fuels management out in the, you know, the open space around Healdsburg. And furthermore, you know, as we look forward to the, you know, fire season, we would like to have some water there in case we did have to use it for a fire. But at the same time right now, we're really focusing on water conservation. So there's some great workshops that are going to be out there for the master gardeners. They're doing that with drought tolerant plants that are also fire resistant. And the gardens that they're showing are really beautiful. So thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, and we will definitely promote those master gardener workshops that are coming up pretty heavily in the month of July. Hi, Maurice.
Hi, Felicia. My question is with the reduced residential water discharge, can the city still maintain the operation of the sanitary sewers?
Terry, you want to take that?
Yeah, so that is something that we have to monitor. That is something we are noticing, that the flows in the sewer system through conservation, that's what we're asking you for, and that's what we're seeing in the raw sewage that's coming into the treatment plant is reduced versus a normal year. One of the things we have to watch is that make sure that those solids continue to flow, and we may have to do more flushing or add some water to that sewer system. If we did that, we would really look to try and promote the use of recycled water for that as well, not using potable water for it. But that's something we are monitoring. But for now, we're in a good condition.
Maurice coming in with an operational question. Hi, Ron. You're muted. Ron, can you hit the unmute button so we can hear you? Okay, maybe we can move on to the next person. Oh. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so, you know, you were the ordinance number 1134 where it has the other restrictions. Hold on.
We can't hear you.
I'm getting rid of it.
I'm gonna try again.
So that document, it confused us because in stage 3 mandatory compliance, you have all the irrigation sprinkling is prohibited, but it says using manual or automatic time-controlled water application. So I'm assuming that's removed, and this is an old document that you referred us to.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know exactly what you're looking at, but we sent out a notice in May around stage 2, which had certain watering days and times. Yep. And starting June 7th, and after we sent out that nixle, we've ceased all outdoor irrigation in order to preserve our water supply. And
so that is probably going to be out of there now, because it looks like you're telling people they can still use drip irrigation, and we can't.
Unfortunately, no automatic irrigation.
Okay. So you probably should amend it anyway.
Okay, thank you.
It's a document you referred us to when you put out your look at the city of Healdsburg Ordinance 1134, and then it goes to stage 3, and then it talks about irrigation. And
yeah,
it still has
okay. We're with you now. Terry, you want to take it?
Joe, you're correct that in the stage 3, the normal ordinance, it does talk about limiting outdoor irrigation, but allowing drip irrigation for drought tolerant plantings. Because of the severity of the drought, that ordinance allows the council to modify those measures to either exclude them or expand upon them. What the council chose to do was expand upon that and eliminate the overhead sprinklers, automatic sprinklers, as well as drip irrigation, and require the only type of outdoor irrigation to be hand watering.
Okay.
Really the focus there is, again, we need to make some choices about which plants we want to survive. And again, the term is to survive, not thrive this summer. And other plants, we may have to really make some choices about, do we let that plant go? And then look at replanting next summer after we have a hopeful wet winter.
Yeah.
So it is 2 minutes to 7. I'm going to suggest that if you guys are open to it, staying on the line, and we will take, we've got a few more hands raised. I know we didn't get to everything in the chat and in the Q&A box. We will log all these questions, and then my weekend project will be to add it to the website so that we're making sure that we're getting this information out and good answers to all of these questions, or the best answers that we can give you. So if everyone's cool with that, we'll continue maybe until about 7:15, and anything that's left over, we'll kind of create a frequently asked questions page on our website. So with that, Griselda, you want to elevate Donna? Or Ron? Ron's here. Are you there?
Hi, yeah, this is Ron. I'm Sheila. I'm Ron's wife.
Hi, Sheila.
So,
welcome.
Hi, thank you guys for doing this. My question is, and I don't mean to sound confrontational, but you know, we're in a climate change and things are getting hotter and we're not getting as much rain. Is there any way to maybe buy water from another county to help us with our plight? You know, we can't assume that we're gonna all of a sudden get rain. And I know we're all hurting here, and I'm just looking for another alternative. Have you guys thought of another county, another city that we might potentially be able to buy some water from until we get through this transition?
Yeah, so certainly we're looking at alternates, right? So how do we supplement our water supply? How do we make ourselves more drought resilient? Because we do expect that these droughts will become more frequently as we move into the future. And so we're looking at options. One of the options is the recycled water pipeline. We can bring that into town. That provides roughly 40 million gallons on an annual basis. And that would help offset potable water that's being used in the parks, at the schools, at the cemetery, and at the golf course. And that offsetted water would be available to residents and businesses for drinking water or public health and public safety needs. And so that would help. Another option that we're looking at that may be a little bit more promising and more cost effective is to look at groundwater wells, but not simply just continuing to pull from aquifers, but also looking at those aquifers as potential storage for water. So in the winter, when we have heavy runoff, we would pull water from the Russian River or Dry Creek, treat that water, and inject it into the aquifer such that we could store it, and then later in the summer pull it back for our needs, for our water supply needs. And that, looking at those aquifer storage and recovery wells, seems like a promising project for the city to help with our water supply and our water security. As far as contracting to other counties or other locations, we do have a contract with Sonoma Water, and the intent of that contract with Sonoma Water is a backup water supply in times exactly like this, and we are using that, and that is really what is allowing the city to have a slightly higher usage of water versus the 55 gallons per person per capita. I mean, if we didn't have that water, we would be in a much worse place. This year, obviously with limited supply, we will not be able to contract with Sonoma Water for additional water. We could consider contracting for additional backup supply of water in future years, but again, we're all working from the same supply. And then there's also, from a state and regional perspective, exporting water from one watershed into another watershed is not well thought of from the state board. Really try to keep the watershed within the water within a watershed in the same location and not see those exports. So again, I think our best bets for Healdsburg is to really look at the aquifer storage and recovery wells as a supplement to our water needs, and well as potentially looking at how do we fund a recycled water project. And in funding that recycled water project, it's a very expensive project. We're trying to get some grant money for that to help the city afford that project. And hopefully we'll have some good news in the next 3 to 6 months on that.
Hi, Donna.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my questions. First of all, thank you so much for all you're doing during this crisis. I know you're working round the clock to be as effective as possible with our limited resources. A couple questions. Recycled water program, is there a hard date to start? Felicia, I know you had told me about you want to do an inspection of people's tanks before you do a delivery, if I understood you correctly. Why would we need to use that water within 24 hours? And then the next thing would be, what kind of aggressive communication program do you have about this crisis other than social media going forward, please? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So trying to do those in order. We will be doing site inspections to make sure the tank is placed in the appropriate location. While we also give you a rundown of the rules, and there's a really simple application that serves as a permit. I do not have a firm start date yet. I've been telling people 2 weeks out, and I hope we can do better than that. 24 to, I got a correction, 24 to, if you sign up for the recycled water program, you have to use the water within 24 to 48 hours because it is recycled water and it behaves differently. And in high heat, it will start to bloom algae. And what you absolutely don't want is 500 gallons of algae to deal with. And so you do have to apply it within 48 hours. So there's a little bit more flexibility than I initially had said. In terms of education and outreach, so we're trying to do a multifaceted approach. Everyone will get a direct mailer. It's just that, like, here's your standard notice. There is social media. We are also looking at kind of those construction signs of placing those around the city and changing locations in neighborhoods. We want to do pretty regular, possibly weekly updates to let people know where we're at in our water supply, and more importantly, how we're doing against our goals. I think it's really important to show people, like, hey, the line graph is trending down because we're achieving our goals. That feels good, and it feels validating to all the hard work that we're doing. I have a running list that's not in front of me, but we are trying to get really creative in how we do this, both with residents and working through the chambers to make sure that visitors and tourists know quick showers, skip the sheet service, certainly no drinking water provided at restaurants unless upon request. So a lot of different methods. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. Our question is we have a health issue here, and we did buy a water tank. So we need to set up a delivery. I have called the number that I was given by my neighbor. We're on Hidden Acres, but I can't get through.
Okay, at the end, Barbara, I'll share, we have an email address that we're trying to route all of those requests to. And it's possible that you are sitting in my voicemail right now, and we will be in touch with you by the end of the week.
Okay, and as far as health issues go, what number do we call?
You can call me, and my direct line is 707-431-3122. If you go to the city website, and we have our main page around drought update and information, my phone number is all over there. 431-122. I'll also add it to the chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Yeah, hi. From what I understand, this program of delivering recycled water is GO. Is that absolutely true? Because I want to go and buy a tank. And I have another question.
Yes, absolutely true. We are moving forward with deliveries in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Now, regarding the tank, if I buy a 550 gallon or whatever tank, it probably has some sort of engineering requirements regarding placement. Is that something that you're going to help us with, or it is? And then how do we access that help?
Yep, so that'll be part of the site visit. So I just dropped the email address. If you can send us your address and the tank size, and we will get you scheduled for a site visit in the next week or two. Hi, Lewis, you're on mute.
Oh, yeah. Let's see here. We have a question about gray water. How do we get credit for a gray water system?
When you say gray water, do you mean pulling your clothes washer
Yes.
discharge water? You're using that on your landscaping?
Yeah.
And so your question is, how do you get credit for it?
Yeah. Isn't there some kind of consideration for that?
So that essentially just reduces your total water usage month over month. And so the credit that would be the water savings on your bill. And so you're already offsetting some of your irrigation, and you can, I mean, please continue to do that. But there's no, you're still at 74 gallons per person per day, but you just happen to be able to take your gray water and apply it to your landscaping. So you're in better shape than a lot of people. Hi, Susan.
Hi, like the other caller, this isn't Susan, it's her husband. Two questions related to the, that you mentioned a little bit ago. Why is the traffic circle included in this proposal to continue with potable water as well as cemeteries? I mean, and I understand the traffic circle on one hand that's kind of our gateway to this to the town, but I mean, this requires drastic measures, and seems like we could just let that ride as well as cemeteries and replant after we get water in 5 years or something.
Felicia, would like me to take that?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So the roundabout is one of the priority sites that we are looking to try to convert over to recycled water. You know, it's one of those questions of the investment that was made. All of those plant materials are drought resistant. We spent a lot of time, Jay Tripathi from Garden Works volunteered to help us refine the plant species. And so it is a lower water use, but it still does require water. And I think it's a balance between the expense of the investment, that image as you come into town, and also just the age of the plant materials. If they were a bit older, they probably would do better on reduced water use. So the plaza and the roundabout are two sites where we are working actively to try to move those over to recycle water entirely.
Hi, Valerie, you're up.
Yes, I wanted to ask, Mr. Crowley, did you write the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan?
So we hired a consultant to pull that together, but yes, I was engaged with that process.
Okay, because this, you know, obviously these are all short-term, you know, we're scrambling because there is a problem, you know, obviously right now, an immediate problem, but this is a long-term problem. In that management plan, it said the city in 2015, the city has completed the design of a recycled water system, which if implemented would extend recycled water mains to, and then it talks about different areas. What in the world is happened to that? And what is going on with, oh my God, we have an immediate problem. Let's scramble around with water trucks running around town, delivering recycled water. Where's the long-term solution to this problem? The city's kind of failed us because that was 6 years ago. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, so the city did when it built the wastewater treatment plant, back in, I believe, 2008, 2006, somewhere around there, developed a plan to bring recycled water into town. That would be a piping system that would come in through all of the city streets, reach the golf course, reach Badger Park, reach the cemetery, move on and head to Rec Park and some of the school facilities, and would help offset the potable water that's used for that. The cost of that project is about $10 million. That's not money that the city has. It's not money that the city had 6 years ago. It's not money that the city's been able to develop now. The city has a lot of projects in the sewer department that we need to implement. We have a lot of aging infrastructure, a lot of sewer systems under our existing streets that we have to focus on to make sure that those continue to work and operate. And so we're looking for a funding source for that recycled water pipeline. In the interim, we're trying to find ways that we can also offset or provide some resiliency in our water supply. And looking at aquifer storage and recovery is likely a much cheaper solution. It's probably about $1 million to $1.5 million solution versus a $10 million solution, and it provides more water, potentially a better supply of water to the city. And so now we're looking at this option. We are looking to find grant funding from the state or from the federal government. We've had a lot of discussions about that. But again, if we don't have the money to build the projects, they can't be completed. They can't be pushed forward. That's the challenge that we have.
Hey, Carl.
Well, I think you answered my question. That was when we expect the gray water to be delivered, and that's fine. So you said you posted the website to sign up, but I don't see that in the chat.
Okay, I'll send it once more.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you very much. Thank you all for your help.
Thanks.
Hi, Felicia. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. So one final question for me. So is the city pursuing with our state representative, Mike? Sorry, what is Mike's last name?
McGuire.
Yes, thank you, Mike McGuire, and our federal representatives to declare a formal disaster to obtain some funds and relief in the future for all the sustained property damage that we're going to incur.
So we haven't engaged the state level on declaring an emergency or a disaster that would open the door for grant dollars or recovery yet. I do suspect at some point that may happen this summer, but that's not there. What we have discussed with Senator McGuire, Assemblymember Wood, Senator Padilla, Congressman Huffman, and several other representatives is trying to get grant funding to push these projects forward. Again, you know, one of the critical things in needing to conserve water this summer is we're not sure what the winter rains are going to bring, what level of rains we're going to receive. And so if we can prepare for next summer and maybe move some of these projects forward, we would be in a better situation. And so we worked with many elected officials at the state and federal levels to try and push forward the need for Healdsburg and see what we can do to receive some grant funding or some type of funding relief for the city.
I just want to note before Paul goes on, this I'm inclined to say will be our last question. We are at 7:20. But my goal is to capture all of the questions that we didn't answer and make sure we get that information out on our website and broadly shared. Paul?
Right. So I get the last word, huh?
You do.
So we have decided not to acquire a 500 gallon, but rather to acquire maybe two 200 gallons. Can we get them both filled?
Yep, absolutely. One-time delivery up to 500 gallons. Someone else had asked, do I need all 500? Absolutely not. We have people getting 55-gallon drums just to keep a couple of choice vegetable plants alive. And so there's a range, but yeah, no more than 500.
Great, thank you, and great job.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to ask that Griselda pulls up the very last slide that has our email address that we're trying to direct all of our major questions around recycled water. How do I read my meter? And so you can jot that down, conservation@ci.healdsburg.ca.us. It's also on the website under current drought information and in the chat a couple of times. I greatly appreciate everyone. We had about 111 attendees tonight. I know that this is an important discussion. And one thing that I would ask is, I'm hoping that you learned a couple of really important things, be it the imperfect logic around drip irrigation or how severe our water supply scarcity is. And I am really hoping that you pay it forward and share with at least 1 or 2 people in Healdsburg that maybe weren't able to attend tonight, really working our sphere of influence so that we can manage this problem as a community and really supporting one another in the process. So with that, I think I'm going to say goodnight. Many thanks, and I'm sure that I will talk to you all again soon. And definitely stay tuned. Social media channels, our utility bill inserts on upcoming events around firescaping, water conservation around the house. Definitely going to try and pivot away, moving more towards the solutions. Now we know all the rules, we know all the things we can't do. What are the solutions? So stay tuned in that, and we really appreciate everyone's efforts.